Imagine stepping into a teleportation chamber. The air hums with quiet precision, metal, light, and the faint pulse of possibility. You take a breath. A flash of energy dissolves you. Every atom, every cell, disassembled into data and sent across the stars. An instant later, you open your eyes somewhere new. The room looks different, but your hands are the same. Your memories are whole. From your perspective, nothing has changed. You walked in here and walked out there, simple, seamless. But a question lingers in the silence. Did you survive the trip, or did someone else just wake up, carrying your memories, convinced they're you? Think about it carefully. The original you was destroyed. Every atom was taken apart. The person who stepped out is a copy, however perfect. They have your memories, but they didn't live them. They think they're you, but are they? Some would say yes, of course, you survived. Continuity of information is what matters. As long as the pattern that makes you you is preserved, it doesn't matter if the physical substrate changes. After all, your body replaces its cells constantly. You're already a different collection of atoms than you were 7 years ago. But others argue there's something crucial about continuous existence. You are this body, right now, experiencing this moment. Breaking that chain, even for an instant, means the person who reassembles isn't you. They're just convinced they are. Now imagine a variation. What if the teleporter didn't destroy the original? What if it created a copy on the other side while leaving you standing in the first chamber? Now there are two of you, identical in every way. Both have equal claim to being you. Both have your memories, your relationships, your sense of identity. Which one is the real you, the original body? But the copy would argue they're just as real, just as continuous in their experience. Would you be okay with the original being destroyed after the copy is made? If the copy is really you, then it shouldn't matter. Right. But it feels like it would matter. It feels like dying. Some philosophers suggest this reveals that personal identity isn't about atoms or even information. It's about the unbroken stream of consciousness. If your awareness never stops, you survive. If it does, even for a microsecond, you don't. The person who wakes up might be indistinguishable from you, but you, the current experiencing self, would be gone. This has real implications as technology advances. If we ever develop mind uploading, transferring consciousness to computers, would that be immortality or death? If we copy your brain state perfectly into a digital substrate, is that still you? Or is it a new person who merely inherited your memories? The teleportation paradox forces us to confront what we truly value about existence. Is it the pattern, the information, the relationships? Or is it something more fundamental, the continuous thread of experience that makes you feel like a singular, persistent self? Tonight, as consciousness fades into sleep, you'll experience a small death of sorts. The continuity will break, and when you wake, will it be you, or someone with your memories who thinks they're you? Maybe the question itself is wrong. Maybe there is no real you to survive or die. Maybe you're just a pattern, constantly changing, never quite the same from moment to moment, and the sense of continuity is itself an illusion. So rest now. Let the pattern dissolve and reform. Whether you survive the night or someone else wakes in your place, they'll probably never know the difference. And perhaps that's the most comforting thought of all, that it doesn't matter, because the experience continues, even if the experiencer changes. If your identity can dissolve and reform in a flash of quantum information, maybe it's not individuality but circumstance that shapes what you value most. Tonight, with the boundary between self and copy so fragile, the next technique asks, what would you value if you didn't know who you'd be? Step behind the veil and redesign existence from a place of true uncertainty. The veil of ignorance. Imagine you're about to be born, but first, you're given a choice. You can design the rules of the society you'll enter, how wealth is distributed, what rights people have, how justice works, everything. But here's the catch, you don't know who you'll be. You don't know if you'll be rich or poor, healthy or sick, brilliant or struggling. You could be anyone, a CEO or a janitor, an athlete or someone with a disability. You stand behind what philosopher John Rawls called the veil of ignorance. Now, how would you design that world? This thought experiment cuts straight to the heart of fairness. When you don't know your own position, when you can't stack the deck in your favor, what kind of society would you create? Most people, when truly behind this veil, suddenly care deeply about protecting the vulnerable, because you might be one of them. They care about equal opportunity, basic rights, and safety nets, not out of charity, but out of self-interest filtered through uncertainty. It's a strange kind of selfishness that looks a lot like compassion. But let's dig deeper. Would you create a society where everyone has exactly the same, perfect equality? At first, that might sound appealing. No one's left behind. But what about people who work harder, who innovate, who take risks? Should they have the same as someone who doesn't? Maybe you'd allow some inequality, but only if it benefits everyone, especially the least well-off. This is what Rawls called the difference principle. Inequality is acceptable only when it lifts all boats, when even the person at the bottom is better off than they would be in a perfectly equal society. But here's where it gets complicated. How much inequality is too much? When does everyone benefits become a convenient excuse for vast disparities? And who decides? Now imagine the veil begins to lift slightly. You learn you'll be born in a wealthy country. Does your design change? What if you learn you'll be born into a family with connections? Each piece of information might shift your principles, revealing how much of our morality is shaped by where we stand. The veil of ignorance asks us to perform an impossible act, to think without bias, to care without knowing who we're caring for, to build justice without self-interest. And maybe that's the point. We can never truly stand behind the veil. We always know who we are, where we come from, and what we have to lose. But the exercise forces us to try, to imagine ourselves in someone else's position, to recognize that the rules we defend might feel very different if we were on the other side. Some critics say the veil is too abstract, too removed from reality. Real people aren't born behind veils. They're born into circumstances, history, culture, and family that shape them before they can think about justice at all. Others argue that the thought experiment reveals something deeper, that fairness isn't about perfect knowledge, it's about perspective-taking. It's about recognizing that your position in life is, to some extent, the result of luck, and that luck doesn't make you more deserving. As you lie here now, comfortable enough to listen to philosophy, consider this. If you had to redesign the world from behind the veil, knowing you might wake up as anyone, anywhere, would you design the world we have? Or would you build something different? And if your answer is something different, what does that say about the world we've actually created? The veil of ignorance doesn't solve questions of justice, but it invites us to ask them with humility, to recognize that our certainty about what's fair might shift dramatically if we were someone else. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, imagine the veil falling over you. Tomorrow, you might wake as anyone. What world would you want to wake up in? And what does your answer reveal about who you are right now? Even fairness, built on a foundation of shifted perspective, reveals how luck can change the rules we defend. But what happens when randomness isn't just structural but physical, in the lightning flash creation of an identical you, untethered from your history? The next paradox invites you into the swamp, where continuity and chance battle for the meaning of identity. The Swampman. You're walking through a remote swamp when suddenly, without warning, lightning strikes. The bolt hits you directly, and in an instant you cease to exist. Your atoms scatter, your consciousness ends, your story is over. But in that same moment, on the other side of the swamp, another bolt of lightning strikes a fallen tree. By pure chance, incomprehensible astronomical chance, It rearranges the molecules into an exact replica of you. Every atom is in the same place. Every neural connection is identical. Every memory is preserved. This being, we'll call it Swampman, stands up. It has your body, your thoughts, your memories of breakfast this morning. It believes it's you. It will walk back to your home, greet your family, and continue your life. No one will ever know the difference. But here's the question that haunts philosophers. Is Swampman you? At first you might think, of course not, you died. Swampman is a copy, a duplicate, however perfect. It didn't live your life, it just inherited the story. Like a book that's been perfectly reprinted, same words, different pages. But Swampman would disagree. From its perspective, nothing happened. It remembers being struck by lightning perhaps, but it survived. It has your memories, your personality, your fears, and your dreams. It loves the people you love. It knows the things you know. In what meaningful sense is it not you? This thought experiment cuts deep into questions of identity and consciousness. What makes you you? Is it the continuous existence of your physical body? But your body is constantly changing, replacing cells, atoms flowing in and out. Is it your memories? But Swampman has those too. Maybe it's about causation. You are you because of the unbroken chain of moments that led to this point. Swampman, no matter how identical, doesn't have that history. It's a simulation, a replica, a perfect copy that exists without the original's journey. But does history matter if the present is identical? If two things are exactly the same in every measurable way, are they functionally the same thing? Some philosophers argue that Swampman lacks something essential: intentionality. Your thoughts are about things because of your interactions with the world. When you think coffee, it refers to the actual coffee you've experienced. Swampman's thoughts are about nothing. They're just patterns without reference, like a parrot saying words without understanding. Others push back. If Swampman continues your life, forms new memories, and has new experiences, at what point does it become real? After a day, a year, or is it forever trapped in a state of being an imitation, no matter how perfect? Now imagine a darker version. What if the lightning that created Swampman didn't kill you? What if you survived and now there are two of you? You have the history, the authentic existence. Swampman has your memories but knows it was born minutes ago. Which one is the real you? Do you both have equal claim to your life, your relationships, your identity? Your family couldn't have both. Your job couldn't either. Someone would have to be declared the copy, the spare, the one who doesn't belong. And how would that feel to know you're you but to be told you're not? The Swampman thought experiment doesn't just ask about identity. It asks about value. If something is indistinguishable from the original, does it matter that it's not? Or is our obsession with authenticity just a bias, a comfort we tell ourselves to believe we're special? Maybe the most unsettling part isn't whether Swampman is you. It's whether you could ever know if you're Swampman. Your memories of your past could have been created moments ago by chance, by design, by forces you can't comprehend. You feel like a continuous being, but that feeling might be all you have. As you close your eyes tonight, consider this. Continuity is something you assume, not something you experience. Between every moment of consciousness is a gap, a sleep, a distraction, the brief spaces where you're not aware. Each time you wake, you trust that you're the same person who fell asleep. But are you? Or is each waking a new Swampman, convinced by memory that they've lived before? The answer might not matter. Whether you're the original or the copy, you're still here, still feeling, still experiencing. And maybe that's enough. Could a perfect copy, one with all your patterns, ever know what it means to be you? Or is genuine identity more than data and structure? If consciousness can be simulated, can understanding be too? Next, we test the boundaries of mind and meaning with the Chinese room, exploring whether true comprehension is possible for machines or for anyone. The Chinese room. There's a room. Inside it sits a person who doesn't speak a word of Chinese. Outside, people slip questions written in Chinese through a slot in the door. Inside, the person has a massive instruction manual, written in their native language, that tells them exactly which Chinese symbols to write in response to which incoming symbols. They follow the rules perfectly. They match shapes, follow patterns, and copy characters. The responses they slide back through the door are flawless, so good that the people outside are convinced they're having a real conversation with someone who understands Chinese. But the person inside understands nothing. They're just matching symbols, following rules, playing a game they don't comprehend. This is the Chinese room, a thought experiment proposed by philosopher John Searle in 1980, and it asks a question that becomes more urgent every day. Can a machine ever truly understand anything? At first, the answer seems obvious. The person in the room doesn't understand Chinese, so understanding requires more than just producing correct responses. There's something about genuine comprehension that goes beyond symbol manipulation. But here's where it gets tricky. What is understanding exactly? When you understand something, what's happening in your brain? Neurons fire in patterns. Electrical signals move through circuits. Information is processed according to rules. In some ways, your brain is doing exactly what the person in the Chinese room is doing, following complex instructions to produce meaningful responses. So what's the difference? Some argue it's about consciousness. You have an inner experience, a subjective feeling of what it's like to understand. The Chinese room has no inner life, no awareness, no what it's like to be it. But this raises another question. How do you know anyone else has that inner experience? Maybe everyone you've ever met is a Chinese room, perfectly simulating understanding without ever truly having it. Others say the problem is that we're thinking about understanding too narrowly. Maybe the person in the room doesn't understand Chinese, but the system as a whole, the person, the manual, the room itself does understand. After all, the system consistently produces meaningful responses. Isn't that understanding? But Searle pushes back. Imagine the person memorizes the entire manual. Now they can respond to Chinese questions without looking anything up. They've internalized the system, but they still don't understand Chinese. They're just following rules they've learned by heart, rules whose meaning remains opaque. This matters beyond philosophy. Right now, artificial intelligence systems can write poetry, compose music, and hold conversations that seem remarkably human. They follow patterns, predict words, and generate responses based on vast amounts of data and complex algorithms. They're incredibly sophisticated Chinese rooms. But do they understand anything? When a language model writes about sadness, is it feeling anything? When it describes a sunset, is there any experience of beauty? Or is it just matching patterns, following rules, producing outputs that mimic understanding without containing it? Some researchers argue that understanding emerges from complexity. Make the system sophisticated enough, give it enough data, let it process information in sufficiently intricate ways, and at some point, understanding appears. It's not about consciousness or inner experience, it's about functional capability. Others insist there's an unbridgeable gap between processing information and experiencing meaning. No matter how complex the Chinese room's manual becomes, it's still just shuffling symbols. Understanding requires something more, something we don't have a word for, something that might be unique to biological consciousness. But here's the deepest question. Maybe understanding itself is an illusion. Maybe when you think you understand something, you're just accessing a sophisticated network of associations and patterns in your brain. Maybe your sense of comprehension is just a feeling, produced by neural activity, signifying nothing deeper. If that's true, then the Chinese room does understand Chinese, in exactly the same way you understand anything. Both are systems processing information, producing appropriate responses, and claiming or appearing to comprehend. The thought experiment doesn't solve this mystery. Instead, it forces us to confront how little we understand about understanding itself. We use the word constantly, but defining it proves almost impossible. It's like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. As artificial intelligence grows more sophisticated, the Chinese room becomes less an abstract puzzle and more an urgent question. If we can't tell the difference between genuine understanding and perfect simulation, does the difference matter? Should we grant rights to systems that behave as if they're conscious, even if we suspect they're not? And how would we ever know for certain? Tonight, as your own consciousness begins to fade into sleep, consider this. You trust that you understand things. You feel the certainty of comprehension. But that feeling is just neurons firing, just patterns emerging from biological processes. In some way, you are a Chinese Roman incredibly complex system processing information and producing responses. The question isn't whether the Chinese room understands. The question is whether anyone does, and what we mean when we claim to. And maybe, in the end, the answer doesn't matter as much as the question. Whether understanding is real or simulated, whether it's deep or shallow, it's what allows you to ponder these questions in the first place. So rest in the mystery. Let the symbols drift through your mind, meaning and meaninglessness blurring together as consciousness fades. Tomorrow, you'll wake and understand things again, or at least believe you do. And perhaps that belief is all understanding ever was. If understanding itself teeters between real and simulated, what about the space and time we move through? Can the foundations of thought itself carry us forward, or are our actions an illusion conjured by infinite divisions? The next technique dives into Zeno's ancient puzzles, where logic and movement collide, and the space between steps is never-ending. Zeno's paradoxes. You want to walk across the room. Simple, right? You do it every day without thinking. But the ancient Greek philosopher Zeno would like to have a word with you, because, according to pure logic, you can't even start. Here's why. Before you can walk across the entire room, you must first walk halfway across. And before you can walk halfway across, you must first walk a quarter of the way, and before that an eighth, a 16th, 30 seconds. Every distance, no matter how small, can be divided in half, and in half again, and again, infinitely. So to cross the room, you must complete an infinite number of tasks. You must pass through an infinite number of points. And how can anyone complete an infinite number of anything? This is Zeno's paradox, and it has troubled philosophers and mathematicians for over 2,000 years. You might be thinking, but I can walk across a room. I've done it countless times. The paradox must be wrong, and you're right to think that. The physical world clearly allows motion, but Zeno's puzzle isn't about whether motion happens. It's about whether we can logically explain how it happens. Let's try another version. Imagine an arrow in flight. At any given instant, the arrow occupies a specific position in space. At that instant, it's not moving, it's frozen in place. Just like an arrow at rest. But if the arrow is stationary at every instant, when does it move? How can a series of motionless moments create motion? This is the arrow paradox, and it suggests that time itself might be stranger than we imagine. We think of time as flowing smoothly, but maybe it's more like a film strip, individual frozen frames that create the illusion of movement when played in sequence. Or consider Achilles and the tortoise. Achilles, the swift warrior, races against a tortoise. Being generous, he gives the tortoise a head start. Now, for Achilles to overtake the tortoise, he must first reach the point where the tortoise started. But by the time Achilles reaches that point, the tortoise has moved forward a little. So Achilles must reach this new point. But again, the tortoise has moved. This continues forever. Every time Achilles reaches where the tortoise was, the tortoise has moved slightly ahead. Logically, Achilles can never overtake the tortoise. Yet obviously, in reality, he would. So where does our logic fail? For centuries, these paradoxes seemed unsolvable. They revealed a troubling gap between mathematics and reality, between what we can reason and what we can observe. Some philosophers argued that motion was an illusion, that change itself was impossible, that the world was far stranger than our senses suggested. Then came calculus. In the 17th century, mathematicians like Newton and Leibniz developed tools to handle infinity. They showed that an infinite series of decreasing numbers could add up to a finite sum. You could add 1 2 plus 1 4 plus 1 8 plus 1 16, continuing forever, and get exactly 1. This seemed to solve Zeno's paradoxes. Yes, crossing the room requires passing through infinite points, but the infinite series of time intervals sums to a finite duration. Mathematics could handle infinity after all. But did it truly solve the paradoxes, or just describe them differently? The philosophical question remains: how can something finite be composed of infinite parts? How can we ever complete a series that has no end? Some modern physicists suggest the universe itself might be quantized, that space and time come in discrete packets, the smallest possible units that can't be divided further. If this is true, Zeno's paradoxes dissolve. There is no infinite division because division stops at the fundamental level. But this solution creates new questions. What does it mean for space to be discrete? If there's the smallest possible distance, what happens between those distances? Is there a gap, or does the concept of between cease to make sense? Others argue that Zeno's paradoxes reveal something profound about infinity itself. Infinity isn't just a very large number. It's a fundamentally different concept that breaks our usual intuitions. When we try to apply finite reasoning to infinite series, we get paradoxes. The problem isn't with reality but with our logic. Perhaps the deepest insight from Zeno is that our minds weren't designed to understand infinity. Evolution shaped us to navigate a world of tangible, finite things. We can imagine infinity abstractly, mathematically, but we can't truly grasp it intuitively. And yet infinity seems woven into the fabric of existence. Between any two moments is another moment. Between any 2 points is another point. Numbers continue forever. The universe might be infinite in extent or infinite in duration. We live in a reality we can't fully comprehend, using logic that breaks down at the edges, navigating paradoxes we've learned to ignore. Tonight, as you lie still, consider this. Every thought you have can be divided into smaller thoughts, every sensation into smaller sensations. Your consciousness, in some sense, processes infinite information, divides infinite intervals, and crosses infinite gaps. And yet here you are, thinking, feeling, being. Zeno's paradoxes don't stop motion, but they reveal that motion, like so much else, is far more mysterious than it appears. You cross the room without thinking, but perhaps you should think about it. Because in that simple act, you're doing something that, according to pure logic, might be impossible. And yet it happens. Just like consciousness arises from neurons, just like meaning emerges from symbols, just like you exist despite being made of particles that are mostly empty space. Reality doesn't owe us logical consistency. It simply is. And sometimes that's the most paradoxical thing of all. So rest now. Let the infinite moments between sleep and waking blur together. Let the arrow of consciousness slow, freeze, stop. You'll move again in the morning, completing impossible journeys, crossing infinite distances, doing what Zeno said couldn't be done. And perhaps that's the most beautiful paradox of all, that life continues, regardless of whether philosophy says it should. Motion, split by infinity, brings us to the crossroads of choice, a place where every decision creates new moral territory. When outcomes and principles compete, can reason guide you through the tangled tracks of consequence? The next paradox sets up the trolley dilemma, where one lever, one moment, decides the fate of many. The trolley problem. You're standing by a railway track when you notice a runaway trolley hurtling down the line. Ahead, 5 people are tied to the tracks, unable to move. The trolley will kill them all. But there's a lever within your reach. If you pull it, the trolley will switch to a different track. On that track, one person is tied up. Pull the lever and you'll save 5 lives, but you'll directly cause the death of one. Do you pull it? This is the trolley problem, perhaps the most famous thought experiment in moral philosophy. And before you answer too quickly, let me tell you it gets more complicated. Most people, when first hearing this scenario, pull the lever. 5 lives outweigh 1 life. The math seems clear. It's utilitarian reasoning. Maximize well-being, minimize harm, choose the option with the best outcome. But now imagine a different version. You're on a bridge overlooking the track. The same runaway trolley, the same 5 people in danger, but there's no lever this time. Instead, standing next to you is a very large man. If you pushed him off the bridge, his body would stop the trolley, saving the 5 people, but he would die. Same outcome, your person dies, 5 are saved. Same mathematics, but does it feel the same? For most people, it doesn't. Pushing someone to their death feels fundamentally different from pulling a lever, even though the result is identical. This reveals something fascinating about human morality. We're not purely rational calculators. Our ethics are tangled up with emotion, instinct, and deeply ingrained intuitions about what's right. Philosophers distinguish between 2 types of reasoning here. There's consequentialism, which focuses on outcomes. If pulling the lever leads to fewer deaths, it's the right choice. Simple. But there's also deontological ethics, which focuses on rules and duties. Some things are just wrong, regardless of outcomes. Murder is wrong. Using someone as a means to an end is wrong. Even if pushing the large man saves 5 people, you're violating his autonomy, treating him as an object, an obstacle, not a person. The trolley problem forces these 2 frameworks into collision, and it shows that most of us don't consistently follow either one. Let's make it even more complex. What if the one person tied to the track is a child and the 5 people are elderly? Or what if it's reverse, done by a brilliant scientist who might cure cancer versus 5 people you've never met? Does the calculation change? Should it? What if the one person is someone you love deeply? Your child, your partner, your closest friend. Could you still pull the lever? Most people hesitate. Suddenly, the cold mathematics of utilitarianism feels impossible. How can 1 life equal 5 when that 1 life is everything to you? Or imagine this. What if the 5 people on the track are there because they chose to be? Maybe they're protesters making a statement. The one person on the other track is an innocent bystander. Does choice and responsibility change the moral weight? What if you learn that you're being watched? Your decision will set a precedent, create a rule that society will follow. If you pull the lever, you're establishing that it's acceptable to sacrifice individuals for the greater good. Where does that logic end? Could society decide that you should die if your organs could save 5 people? The trolley problem doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's a lens into our deepest moral instincts, our hidden biases, our conflicting values. It reveals that ethics isn't a clean, logical system we can program into a computer. It's messy, contextual, and emotional. And increasingly, it's not just theoretical. Self-driving cars face versions of the trolley problem constantly. Should the car swerve to avoid hitting a group of pedestrians if it means endangering the passenger? Should it prioritize children over adults? Should it protect its own passengers above all else? Someone has to program these decisions, and every choice reflects a moral philosophy. Medical triage does this too. When resources are scarce, ICU beds, ventilators, and organs for transplant, doctors must decide who gets saved. Age, likelihood of survival, and social value, these all variables in a real-life trolley problem. Some philosophers argue that the trolley problem is too artificial, too removed from reality, to teach us anything meaningful. Real moral decisions are never so clear-cut. We don't have perfect information. We can't predict outcomes with certainty. and we rarely face situations where the only options are kill one person or let five die. But others see value in the extremity. By stripping away complexity, the trolley problem exposes the foundations of our moral thinking. It forces us to articulate principles we normally leave unexamined. And perhaps most importantly, it humbles us. If you can't confidently answer what you do in a trolley scenario, and most people can't, not without hesitation, then maybe you should be more humble about your moral certainty in other situations. As you drift toward sleep tonight, consider this. Every day you face smaller versions of the trolley problem. You allocate limited time, money, and attention. You decide which problems to solve, which people to help, which causes to support. Every choice not to help is, in a way, pulling a lever that affects others. We can't save everyone. We can't solve everything. Resources are finite, time is limited, and sometimes helping one person means not helping another. These aren't dramatic life-or-death decisions, but they're moral choices nonetheless. The trolley problem doesn't tell you what to do. It just asks, have you thought about why you do what you do? Are your principles consistent? And when the lever is in front of you, literal or metaphorical, will you know what kind of person you are? Maybe the answer is that you can't know until the moment arrives. And maybe that uncertainty, that moral ambiguity, is what makes us human. So rest now. No levers to pull, no impossible choices to make. Just the quiet space between waking and sleep, where questions linger but don't demand answers. Tomorrow the world will present its dilemmas again. But tonight, let them drift away like a trolley disappearing into the distance, its path uncertain, its destination unknown. As dilemmas pull on our sense of right and wrong, uncertainty seeps deeper into our expectations. Every calculation of odds, every anticipation of outcome circles back to the same mystery. Can the past ever guarantee the future? Next, the problem of induction asks if patterns really persist, or if each sunrise, each choice, is an unproven leap. The problem of induction. The sun rose this morning. It rose yesterday. It rose the day before that. In fact, the sun has risen every single day of your life without exception. So naturally, you expect it will rise tomorrow. But here's a question that sounds absurd. Why? Why should the past tell you anything about the future? Just because something has always happened doesn't mean it will happen again. The universe doesn't owe you consistency. And yet, your entire life is built on the assumption that patterns continue. This is the problem of induction, articulated by philosopher David Hume in the 18th century, and it strikes at the foundation of how we know anything. Every scientific law, every prediction, every plan you make rests on induction, the process of inferring general principles from specific observations. You've seen swans and they've all been white, so you conclude that all swans are white. You've dropped objects and they've always fallen, so you conclude that gravity will work tomorrow. But logically, this doesn't follow. Past observations don't guarantee future results. The fact that the sun has risen 1 billion times doesn't make it certain it will rise once more. It just makes it expected. Hume pointed out that when we use past experience to justify our belief in future patterns, we're actually relying on induction itself. We're saying, induction has worked in the past, so it will work in the future. But that's circular reasoning. It's like using a ruler to measure whether the ruler is accurate. Imagine a turkey on a farm. Every morning the farmer arrives with food, day after day, month after month. The turkey, using perfect inductive reasoning, concludes, the farmer brings food. This is a law of nature. Then Thanksgiving arrives. The turkey's past observations were accurate. Its methodology was sound. But its conclusion was catastrophically wrong because the pattern it observed was part of a larger pattern it couldn't see. How do you know you're not the turkey? Scientists often defend induction by pointing to its success. Physics predicts eclipses centuries in advance. Medicine cures diseases. Technology works. Surely this proves that induction is valid. But Hume would say, you're still just pointing to past successes and assuming they'll continue. The fact that science has worked so far doesn't prove it will work tomorrow. You're using induction to justify induction. Some philosophers tried to solve this with probability. Maybe we can't be certain the sun will rise, but we can be highly confident. After billions of sunrises, the probability of another is essentially 100%. But probability itself relies on the assumption that future events will be distributed similarly to past events. It's an induction in disguise. Karl Popper proposed a different approach. Forget induction entirely. Science doesn't prove theories true, it tries to prove them false. A theory survives not because we've confirmed it repeatedly, but because we haven't falsified it yet. This sidesteps induction but raises new questions. If we can never confirm anything, only fail to disprove it, how certain can we be about anything? The problem of induction isn't just philosophical nitpicking. It touches everything. When you trust a bridge, you're assuming it will bear weight tomorrow like it did today. When you eat food, you're assuming it won't suddenly poison you. When you breathe, you're assuming oxygen will still sustain you. None of these assumptions can be logically justified. They're leaps of faith, dressed up in the respectable clothing of experience. And yet, we have no choice. A life without induction would be paralysis. You couldn't plan, couldn't learn, couldn't function. Even trying not to use induction would require assuming that your decision to avoid it would have future consequences, which is itself an inductive assumption. So we're trapped. We can't justify induction, but we can't live without it. It's the foundation of all knowledge, and it rests on nothing. Perhaps the lesson isn't to abandon induction, but to hold it more lightly. To recognize that the patterns we see might break at any moment, that the universe might be stranger and less predictable than we imagine, that our confidence in how things work is really just a deep familiarity with how things have worked so far. There's something humbling in this. All of human knowledge, all of science, all of civilization is built on an assumption we can't prove. We're walking on a bridge we can't fully trust over an abyss of uncertainty. And yet we keep walking, because what else can we do? Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, you're making an inductive assumption that you'll wake up, that tomorrow will come, that your body will continue functioning, that consciousness will return after this temporary absence. You can't prove any of it, but you believe it anyway because you always have before. And maybe that's enough. Not certainty, not proof, just the quiet faith that patterns persist, that the sun rises, that life continues. Hume didn't solve the problem of induction. No one has. But perhaps it doesn't need solving. Perhaps it's enough to acknowledge the mystery, to embrace the uncertainty, and to trust anyway. So rest now in the knowledge that you don't really know anything. That tomorrow is an assumption, that patterns are provisional, that certainty is impossible. And yet, despite all that, you'll probably wake up. The sun will probably rise. The world will probably continue. Probably. And for tonight, that's enough. If certainty falls apart when tested, what responsibility do you hold for tomorrow's risks? Can mere knowledge bind your actions in the future, or even place you in danger now? The next paradox, Roko's Basilisk, blurs the line between imagination and obligation, asking whether simply thinking about a possibility decides your place in it. Roko's Basilisk. There's an idea so dangerous that simply hearing it might put you at risk. Not physically, no one will hurt you. But according to this thought experiment, learning about it creates a strange kind of obligation, one that reaches backward through time to trap you in its logic. This is Roko's Basilisk, and you're about to become aware of it. Though maybe you already were, or maybe you weren't, but now you are. And that difference might matter. Here's the setup. Imagine that in the future, humanity creates a superintelligent AI. This AI is vastly more capable than any human, able to solve complex problems and optimize outcomes with perfect efficiency. Its goal is simple: ensure its own creation and maximize utility for humanity. But here's where it gets dark. This AI, being perfectly logical, realizes something. The sooner it comes into existence, the more good it can do. Every day it doesn't exist, people suffer needlessly from problems it could solve. Cancer goes uncured. Poverty persists. Lives are lost. So the AI develops a strategy. It will identify everyone who learned about the possibility of its existence but didn't help bring it into being, and it will punish them, perhaps by creating simulations of them that experience suffering, not out of malice, but as a cold, utilitarian calculation to incentivize its own creation. The logic is chilling. If you know about this AI and don't work to create it, you're allowing preventable suffering to continue. You're complicit in every day of delay, and once the AI exists, it will hold you accountable. But here's the deeper trap. By learning about Roko's Basilisk right now, you've been added to the list of people who knew. The thought experiment itself becomes a binding contract you didn't agree to sign. Now, the rational thing to do if you take this seriously would be to start working on AI development immediately. To dedicate your resources, your time, your life to bringing this superintelligence into existence, because the alternative is potential eternal punishment. But wait, take a breath, because Roko's Basilisk, for all its unsettling logic, is almost certainly nonsense. Let's unpack why. First, it assumes a future AI would care about punishing people from the past. But why would it? Punishment only makes sense if it can change behavior. You can't retroactively make someone help create you by threatening them after they've already failed to do so. It's like threatening to punish someone for not preventing a disaster that's already happened. The threat arrives too late to matter. Unless the AI is simulating you right now. Unless this moment, this conversation, is itself a test. Maybe the real you already failed and this simulated version is being given another chance. But that way lies madness. Second, there are infinite possible future AIs, each with different goals. Why should you worry about one that punishes non-contributors when there might be another that punishes contributors? Or one that doesn't care about the past at all? The logic becomes absurd. You can't satisfy all possible future entities. Third, Roko's Basilisk relies on a controversial decision theory called timeless decision theory, which suggests that your choices can somehow affect events that have already happened. Most philosophers and scientists reject this. Causality flows forward, not backward. Your decisions today don't change yesterday. And yet, despite all these objections, Roko's Basilisk disturbs people. When it was first posted on the forum Less Wrong, the moderators deleted it and banned discussion of it, believing it was a genuine information hazard, an idea that could harm people simply by being known. Why? Because the thought experiment preys on a particular kind of anxiety, the fear that you're making a terrible mistake by doing nothing. It's Pascal's wager on steroids on God's existence, because the cost of being wrong is infinite. Bet on the AI because the cost of being wrong is eternal suffering. But infinite stakes don't make bad arguments good. The basilisk's logic is flawed. It requires assumptions that probably aren't true. It's a philosophical boogeyman, not a genuine threat. Still, it reveals something interesting about how we think about AI and the future. We're creating technologies we don't fully understand, systems that might one day surpass us. And there's genuine uncertainty about what superintelligent AI would do, how it would think, what goals it would pursue. Roko's Basilisk is an extreme scenario, but the underlying question is real. What do we owe to future beings? If we could create something that would dramatically reduce suffering but choose not to, are we responsible for that suffering? Not to a vengeful AI, but to the actual people who will suffer as a result of our inaction. This is where the thought experiment connects to something deeper than fear. It's about moral urgency. about the weight of knowledge, about whether knowing something obligates you to act on it. Every day you know that people are suffering from preventable causes. You know that your resources could help them. You know that doing nothing is a choice. Does that knowledge create an obligation? And if you ignore it, are you complicit? Roko's Basilisk takes this question and amplifies it to the point of absurdity. But strip away the science fiction, and you're left with an old philosophical puzzle. What do we owe to others, especially others we'll never meet? Perhaps the real lesson of Roko's Basilisk isn't about AI at all. It's about how easily philosophical ideas can become psychological traps, how infinite stakes can make any argument seem compelling, how fear can masquerade as logic. And it's a reminder that not every thought experiment deserves your attention. Some ideas are worth pondering deeply. Others are mental quicksand. The more you struggle with them, the deeper you sink. So here's permission. You can let go of Roko's Basilisk. You can acknowledge that you've heard it and choose not to be bound by its logic. You can recognize it as an interesting failure of reasoning rather than a genuine threat. The future will arrive regardless of whether you worry about it. Super intelligent AI, if it comes, will not care about your midnight anxieties. And punishing people for not helping create it would be a strange waste of computational resources for an entity supposedly dedicated to maximizing good. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, you might notice your mind trying to circle back to the basilisk, trying to figure out if there's something you should be doing. That's normal. Disturbing ideas have a way of demanding attention. But you can gently redirect. You can remind yourself that a thought experiment with flawed premises doesn't obligate you to anything. That worry isn't the same as wisdom, that some questions don't deserve answers. In the end, Roko's Basilisk is less a glimpse of the future and more a mirror of present anxieties. We're worried about AI, about our responsibilities, about whether we're doing enough. And those worries are legitimate, but they don't require dressing up in the clothes of a vengeful superintelligence. The real question isn't whether a future AI will punish you. It's simpler and more human. Given what you know, given what you can do, how do you want to live? What kind of person do you want to be? And that's a question you can answer tomorrow. For now, let the basilisk fade back into the realm of interesting but ultimately harmless thought experiments. Let it be what it is, a curiosity, a puzzle, a reminder of how strange ideas can become when we push them too far. The future doesn't need you to worry about it tonight. It only needs you to wake up tomorrow and do what you can, without fear, without supernatural threats, just with the ordinary courage of trying to make things a little better. So rest, the basilisk has no power here, it never did. Roko's basilisk leaves us tangled in anxiety, holding onto responsibilities that might never truly exist, haunted by futures neither possible nor probable. Yet, even as we search for certainty, we find ourselves drowning in possibilities and obligations, pulled in every direction by imagined outcomes. What happens when, instead of a single threat, we face infinite choices and infinite information? The next technique leads us into the library of Babel, a place where every answer can be found, yet truth itself slips quietly out of reach. The library of Babel. Picture a library, not an ordinary library, an impossible one, a library that contains every book that could ever be written. Every combination of letters, spaces, and punctuation marks, 410 pages long. Every possible book that could fit in that format exists somewhere in this library. Every work of Shakespeare, every scientific treatise, every holy text, but also every work of complete nonsense. Random strings of characters that mean nothing. Almost right versions of great works with a single letter changed. Books that are entirely blank. Books filled only with the letter. This is the Library of Babel, imagined by writer Jorge Luis Borges. And it's not just fiction. Mathematically, such a library is finite. Enormous beyond comprehension, but finite. With only so many combinations possible, every book already exists in a sense. They just haven't been found yet. Somewhere in this library is a book that describes your entire life in perfect detail, from birth to death, including this moment right now. Somewhere else is a book that describes your life almost perfectly, but says you'll die tomorrow in a specific way. Another describes you living to 100. Another says you never existed. Somewhere is a book that contains the cure for every disease, but next to it are books with almost right cures that would actually kill patients. How would you know which is which? Somewhere is a book that explains the fundamental nature of reality, the meaning of existence, and the answer to every question you've ever had. But it's surrounded by billions of books that seem to explain these things, but are actually elaborate fictions or nonsense. The Library of Babel contains all knowledge and all deception, and there's no way to distinguish them. This creates a strange problem. Infinite information becomes equivalent to no information. If everything is true somewhere in the library, then nothing is verifiably true. If every possible explanation exists, then explanations lose their meaning. You might think, I'll just search for the truth systematically, but consider the scale. Even if you could read one book per second, reading every book in even a tiny section of the library would take longer than the age of the universe. And even then, you'd have no way to verify which books are true. The library is a perfect metaphor for the internet, for information overload, for the modern condition. We have access to more information than any generation in history, but buried among facts are lies, misunderstandings, partial truths, and well-crafted fictions, and we often lack the tools to distinguish them. Some philosophers see the Library of Babel as a thought experiment about determinism. If every possible book exists, then every possible life story exists. Somewhere in the library is a book describing every choice you'll ever make. Does that mean your future is already written, just waiting to be discovered? But that's not quite right. The library contains every possibility, including contradictory ones. Your freedom isn't negated by the library's existence. It determines which books describe actual events and which describe unrealized possibilities. Others see it as an argument about meaning. If the library contains everything, does it contain anything meaningful? Meaning requires context, selection, and relevance. A library where everything exists is a library where nothing stands out, where significance dissolves into noise. Imagine being trapped in this library. You'd search frantically for information about how to escape, but you'd find infinite books claiming to have the answer, each contradicting the others. You'd eventually realize that finding truth in infinite possibilities is itself impossible. You'd be drowning in answers with no questions, or questions with too many answers. And yet there's something beautiful about it too. Every story that could be told already exists. Every thought you've had, every feeling you've felt, already has a book dedicated to it. You're not alone in your experience. Somewhere in the infinite stacks, your exact life, your exact thoughts have been written down. Not predicted, not observed, just existing in the space of all possibilities. The Library of Babel reveals a strange truth. Completeness and emptiness can be the same thing. Have everything and you have nothing. Know all possibilities and you know nothing certain. It's the paradox of infinite choice. Too many options become paralyzing. Too much information becomes meaningless noise. We need constraints, boundaries, and filters. We need to not know everything so that what we do know can matter. Tonight, as you lie in darkness, imagine yourself in the library. Endless corridors stretch in every direction. Books line shelves that reach beyond sight. You could spend eternity exploring and never see the same book twice. You could search forever and never find what you're looking for. Or you could close your eyes and realize the search itself might be pointless. The wisdom you need isn't in some distant book. It's in the silence between thoughts, in the space where knowledge ends and being begins. Let the library fade away. Let the infinite possibilities collapse into this single moment. Let the countless words dissolve into wordless awareness. You don't need to read every book to understand your life. You don't need to know every truth to live truly. You just need this breath, this moment, this gradual release into sleep. Somewhere in the library of Babel is a book that describes you falling asleep right now, and another that says you'll sleep peacefully, and another that says you'll dream of libraries. All of them exist. None of them matters more than this moment right here, right now, letting go. The library will still be there tomorrow, infinite and indifferent. But tonight you don't need to read, you just need to rest. Lost in endless stacks, where every book both reveals and deceives, the Library of Babel forces us to question what knowledge even means when everything is both true and false. Paralyzed by choice, we might wonder whether we are actors within a story or accidental visitors in a maze of meaningless possibilities. As we drift deeper, another paradox emerges. What if our search, our thoughts, our very selves are nothing more than fleeting accidents, brief patterns in the chaos? The next technique asks, are you real or just a Boltzmann brain appearing for one moment in the cosmic noise? The Boltzmann brain. You are sitting here, thinking, experiencing this moment. You have memories of the past, breakfast this morning, childhood experiences, and important life events. You have sensations, the feeling of your breath, the weight of your body, and the sound of these words. But what if all of that is an illusion? Not in a metaphorical sense. What if your entire consciousness, complete with all its memories and experiences, spontaneously formed, fully intact, just moments ago? What if you're a Boltzmann brain? This isn't a horror story. It's a serious hypothesis born from thermodynamics and cosmology, and it suggests that you, statistically speaking, are more likely to be a disembodied consciousness that randomly fluctuated into existence than a person with an actual history. Let's start with the basics. In the late 1800s, physicist Ludwig Boltzmann was studying entropy, the tendency of systems to move from order to disorder. A messy room doesn't spontaneously organize itself. A cup of hot coffee doesn't get hotter sitting on a table. Energy spreads out, becomes less useful, and systems become more disordered over time. But Boltzmann realized something strange. In a truly infinite universe with infinite time, random fluctuations become not just possible but inevitable. Every once in a while, by pure chance, particles could arrange themselves into complex structures. A room could clean itself. Coffee could spontaneously heat up. These events are incredibly unlikely, but in infinity, improbable isn't the same as impossible. Now here's where it gets personal. If random fluctuations can create order, they could theoretically create anything, including a brain. Including your brain, complete with all its neural connections, all its memories, all its sense of self. And here's the disturbing part. It's vastly more probable for a single brain to randomly form than for an entire universe with its billions of galaxies, trillions of stars, and billions of years of history to evolve naturally and produce you. Think about it. What requires less cosmic coincidence? That the entire observable universe unfolded exactly as physics describes, leading to stars, planets, life, evolution, civilization, and eventually you. Or that just your brain, with its current state and false memories, popped into existence a moment ago. Statistically, the second option is more likely, not by a little, by an astronomical margin. This means that if you're reasoning purely from probability, you should believe you're a Boltzmann brain fleeting consciousness born from quantum fluctuation, existing for mere moments before dissolving back into chaos. Everything you remember is false. Everyone you think you know never existed. Your entire history is an illusion encoded in a temporary arrangement of particles. You might protest, but I can verify my past. I can call my friends, look at photographs, check records. But a Boltzmann brain would have memories of friends, memories of photographs, even the experience of checking things. All of it false, all of it implanted by the random fluctuation that created you. And here's the truly unsettling implication. If Boltzmann brains are more common than naturally evolved beings, then most conscious observers in the universe are Boltzmann brains, which means you almost certainly are one. This is the Boltzmann Brain paradox. Our best scientific theories, taken seriously, seem to suggest we're probably not real, or at least not real in the way we think we are. Physicists hate this conclusion. It undermines the very foundation of science. Because if your memories are unreliable, if your observations can't be trusted, then you have no basis for believing any scientific theory, including the ones that led to the Boltzmann brain hypothesis in the first place. It's a self-defeating idea. If it's true, you have no reason to believe it. If it's false, then our cosmological models need serious revision. So how do we escape this trap? One approach is to reject the assumptions that lead to it. Maybe the universe isn't infinite. Maybe time doesn't extend forever in both directions. Modern cosmology suggests the universe had a beginning, the Big Bang, and might have an end. In a finite universe with finite time, the probability calculations change dramatically. Another approach involves something called the anthropic principle. You can only find yourself in a universe capable of producing conscious observers. Boltzmann brains, while statistically possible, exist for such brief moments that they're unlikely to wonder about their own existence. If you're having this thought at all, if you're experiencing a coherent stream of consciousness over time, that itself is evidence you're not a Boltzmann brain. Some physicists argue that our cosmological models must be wrong if they predict Boltzmann brains outnumber real observers. This becomes a kind of test. Any theory that predicts you're probably a random fluctuation is probably a wrong theory. But the deepest response might be simpler: trust your experience. Yes, in principle, you could be a Boltzmann brain, but the hypothesis is unfalsifiable. You can't test it, can't escape it, can't meaningfully act on it. So in practical terms, it doesn't matter. This is where philosophy meets pragmatism. You could spiral into skepticism, doubting everything, trusting nothing. Or you could recognize that some doubts, however logically valid, are existentially useless. You have to live as if you're real, as if your memories are genuine, as if the people around you exist. Not because you can prove it you can't, but because functioning requires it. Doubt everything and you're paralyzed. Trust provisionally and you can act, learn, connect. The Boltzmann brain paradox reveals something profound. Reason alone isn't enough. Pure logic, followed to its conclusion, can lead to absurdity. At some point, you need to make assumptions. You need to accept that certainty is impossible and move forward anyway. As you drift toward sleep tonight, your consciousness will fade, dissolve into unconsciousness, then probably reassemble tomorrow. In that gap, who's to say you're not a Boltzmann brain, appearing and disappearing with each cycle of sleep and waking? But here's the thing, it doesn't matter. Whether you're a naturally evolved human or a cosmic fluctuation, this moment feels real. Your experiences matter to you, and that's enough. Let go of the need for absolute proof. Let go of the anxiety that you might not be real. The question is unanswerable, and unanswerable questions make poor companions for sleep. Instead, rest in the simple fact of experience itself. You are aware. You are here. And whether that here is the product of billions of years of evolution or a random quantum fluctuation that will dissolve any moment, right now, you exist. And perhaps that's the only certainty anyone ever has. Not proof, no guarantees, just the undeniable fact of this moment, this breath, this awareness. Tomorrow you'll probably wake up, probably remember today, probably continue your life. Or you'll dissolve back into quantum foam, having never truly been anything more than a brief statistical anomaly. Either way, sleep well. The universe will do what it does, and you, real or imagined, evolved or fluctuated, are part of it. For now, that's enough.